Edgar Allan Poe was born on January 19, 1809, in the historic city of Boston, during the early American Republic, a time shaped by uncertainty and cultural transition. From his first breath, Poe entered a world defined by movement rather than stability, as his parents were traveling stage actors, living between performances and cities. This unsettled beginning quietly shaped his earliest existence, surrounding him with voices, scripts, and fragile livelihoods rather than permanence. Though he would never remember these earliest days, the conditions of his birth placed him within a life already vulnerable to loss. America itself was young, searching for identity, and so was Poe, an infant born into a nation still defining its cultural voice. In this moment, nothing yet suggested darkness or genius, only the arrival of a child whose life would soon be shaped by absence, imagination, and a relentless search for meaning. By the age of 1, Edgar Allan Poe's world began to quietly fracture. His father had already disappeared from his life, leaving no memory, no explanation, only absence. As Poe reached the age of 2, tragedy deepened when his mother, Elizabeth Arnold Poe, fell gravely ill while continuing to perform on stage. In December of 1811, tuberculosis claimed her life, leaving Edgar orphaned before he could understand the meaning of loss. There were no dramatic farewells, only a sudden silence where a mother's voice once existed. This early rupture did not announce itself as trauma, yet it embedded itself deeply within him. Long before Edgar Allan Poe could speak in full sentences, the foundations of his life were shaped by disappearance, fragility, and separation, forces that would quietly follow him into adulthood. Between the ages of 2 and 6, Edgar Allan Poe entered a new chapter shaped by quiet adjustment rather than belonging. He was taken into the Richmond household of John and Frances Allan, a prosperous merchant family living within the customs of early 19th century Virginia. Frances Allan offered warmth and emotional stability, providing Edgar with care and structure during his earliest childhood years. John Allan, however, remained distant, viewing the child more as an obligation than a son. Edgar Allan Poe grew within comfort but without certainty, surrounded by material security yet aware, even at a young age, of emotional distance. He learned manners, routine, and observation, absorbing the contrasts between affection and restraint. These formative years did not bring happiness or sorrow in extremes, but something quieter. A sense of living between worlds, neither fully claimed nor entirely abandoned, as his identity slowly began to form. Between the ages of 6 and 10, Edgar Allan Poe began to quietly separate himself from the world around him through observation rather than action. Living in Richmond, Virginia, he showed early signs of intellectual sensitivity, preferring books, language, and solitude over loud companionship. He learned to read fluently, absorbing poetry, classical stories, and spoken rhythm with unusual attention. Adults noticed his seriousness, his calm presence, and the way he listened more than he spoke. Edgar Allan Poe was not yet shaped by grief or ambition, but by awareness, watching conversations, expressions, and silences. These childhood years were gentle on the surface, structured by routine and education, yet inwardly formative. His imagination grew not through fantasy alone, but through careful attention to human behavior, quietly preparing the foundation of a mind that would later explore emotion with rare precision. Between the ages of 10 and 15, Edgar Allan Poe's childhood expanded beyond America as he traveled to England with the Allan family, entering a world shaped by tradition, discipline, and classical education. Living abroad during the early 1800s, Poe was enrolled in boarding schools where structure and formality defined daily life. He studied languages, history, and literature, absorbing European influences that quietly refined his intellect. Though physically distant from Virginia, he remained emotionally reserved, often turning inward rather than outward. Edgar Allan Poe learned to adapt to unfamiliar surroundings, observing customs, accents, and social restraint with careful attention. These years abroad did not harden him, they sharpened him. The experience of displacement deepened his sense of identity, reinforcing the habit of introspection and reflection that would later distinguish his voice as both American in origin and universal in reach. Between the ages of 15 and 17, Edgar Allan Poe returned to America from England, carrying with him a quiet maturity beyond his years. Settling once more in Richmond, Virginia, he resumed formal schooling, but the experiences abroad had altered his perspective. He now observed the familiar with a deeper awareness, noticing the contrasts between social expectation and personal inclination. Literature, poetry, and classical studies became both refuge and fascination. Yet, even as he excelled academically, tension with John Allan quietly persisted, foreshadowing future conflict. Poe's mind, already inclined toward introspection, began shaping the duality of his later works, the interplay between order and chaos, reality and imagination. These years were not marked by dramatic events but by internal growth, laying the foundation for the disciplined, perceptive, and sensitive intellect that would soon emerge in both his poetry and prose. At 17, Edgar Allan Poe entered the University of Virginia, full of youthful ambition and intellectual curiosity. The campus offered a structured environment for study in classical literature, languages, and philosophy, where Poe's natural aptitude quickly became evident. Yet alongside promise, pressure grew. Financial support from John Allan was inconsistent, forcing Poe to rely on his own ingenuity, sometimes through gambling, to meet tuition and living costs. This period introduced him to the first taste of adult responsibility, blending brilliance with hardship. Despite his academic successes, the tension between personal aspiration and external limitation weighed heavily. These months at the university were formative, shaping not only his intellect but his understanding of human struggle, risk, and independence, elements that would echo profoundly in his later writing. By the age of 18, Edgar Allan Poe faced the first major rupture of his young adulthood. Financial support from John Allan had become inconsistent and unreliable, leaving Poe responsible for his own survival at a critical stage of life. Gambling, which he reluctantly turned to, brought temporary relief but led to mounting debt, forcing him to leave the University of Virginia prematurely. This period was marked by quiet disappointment rather than drama. A young man of exceptional intellect confronted the limits imposed by circumstance and guardianship. These months crystallized Poe's understanding of instability, self-reliance, and the precarious balance between brilliance and vulnerability. Though brief, this chapter profoundly shaped his character, planting early seeds of the resilience and introspective depth that would define both his life and his literary genius. Between the ages of 19 and 21, Edgar Allan Poe took his first deliberate steps as a writer, channeling his intellect and early life experiences into poetry and short stories. In 1827, he published his first collection, Tamerlane and Other Poems, anonymously, revealing the melancholy and sensitivity that would characterize his work. Though the volume received little attention at the time, it marked the beginning of a life devoted to literary creation. Poe lived modestly, moving between cities, observing human behavior, and refining his voice. These formative years combined struggle with determination. The young writer confronted poverty, uncertainty, and self-doubt, yet persisted in his pursuit of expression. Here, the foundation of Poe's genius emerged: a disciplined mind, a refined poetic ear, and an introspective nature, quietly preparing him for the extraordinary works that would soon follow. At the age of 21, Edgar Allan Poe sought structure and opportunity by enlisting in the United States Army under a false name, stepping into a disciplined world far removed from the uncertainties of his early life. Within this regimented environment, he excelled, quickly rising to the rank of sergeant major, demonstrating intelligence, diligence, and adaptability. Yet the strict routines and hierarchies of military life could not contain his restless, creative mind. Despite success and recognition, Poe yearned for intellectual freedom and literary pursuit. Within these months, he carefully navigated regulations to secure an honorable discharge, simultaneously showcasing resourcefulness and resolve. This period of disciplined service not only provided a temporary refuge from financial insecurity but also reinforced a recurring theme in his life: the tension between authority and independence, structure and imagination, duty and personal ambition. Between the ages of 22 and 23, Edgar Allan Poe briefly entered the United States Military Academy at West Point, seeking both discipline and opportunity within an institution of prestige. Though his intellect and determination allowed him to excel academically, Poe's restless nature and desire for literary freedom soon clashed with rigid military expectations. He deliberately neglected certain duties, carefully navigating rules to create a path toward dismissal. This strategic departure, executed with a mix of foresight and audacity, marked his final break from formal authority. By the age of 23, Poe had fully committed himself to a life defined not by structure imposed from outside, but by the rigorous demands of his own mind, intellect, and emerging artistic vision. These formative choices would echo throughout his career, revealing early signs of independence, resilience, and the tension between genius and constraint. Between the ages of 23 and 27, Edgar Allan Poe fully embraced the life of a writer and critic, navigating the literary world with determination and sharp intellect. He moved between cities such as Baltimore, Boston, and New York, working as an editor and reviewer while refining his poetic and narrative voice. Financial stability remained elusive, yet Poe's relentless focus on literature forged his skill in both criticism and creation. During these years, he published numerous poems and stories, honing themes of melancholy, mystery, and psychological insight. This period of survival through words demanded discipline, self-reliance, and resilience, as he balanced professional responsibilities with the pursuit of artistic excellence. By age 27, Poe had solidified his reputation as a keen mind and emerging literary figure, laying the groundwork for the works that would secure his place in history. Between the ages of 27 and 30, Edgar Allan Poe experienced a brief period of personal stability through his marriage to Virginia Clemm, his 13-year-old cousin, in 1836. Their union brought companionship, warmth, and a temporary refuge from financial and professional uncertainty. Poe continued to work as an editor, critic, and emerging literary figure, while nurturing his writing in poetry and short stories. Despite the calm this relationship provided, fragility persisted. Financial hardship, societal pressures, and Virginia's later health challenges introduced quiet anxiety. These years reflect the duality that would characterize much of Poe's life: intimate joy and creative growth interwoven with persistent vulnerability. During this period, Poe's emotional depth and sensitivity matured, shaping both the tone and intensity of his future works, and preparing him to explore themes of love, loss, and melancholy with unprecedented skill. Between the ages of 30 and 33, Edgar Allan Poe revolutionized American literature by developing his signature style of psychological horror and dark romanticism. During these years, he wrote seminal works such as The Telltale Heart and The Fall of the House of Usher, exploring the fragility of the human mind, obsession, and mortality. His literary approach combined meticulous attention to narrative structure with an acute understanding of emotion and suspense. Amid these creative triumphs, Poe navigated personal instability, financial insecurity, and Virginia's worsening health, channeling tension and vulnerability into his stories. By age 33, his work had begun to establish him as a master of the macabre, blending imagination with precision and laying the foundation for the enduring legacy that would define both his name and the genre he transformed forever. At 35, Edgar Allan Poe created a groundbreaking literary form, the detective story. With C. Auguste Dupin in The Murders in the Rue Morgue, he showed how careful observation and logical reasoning could solve complex mysteries. Unlike his earlier tales of horror and melancholy, these stories emphasized intellect, method, and analytical thinking, balancing darkness with precision. Poe observed human behavior with extraordinary attention, noticing details often overlooked, and built narratives that guided readers through deduction. Though recognition was limited at the time, this innovation laid the foundation for modern detective fiction. The stories reveal Poe's ability to combine imagination with logic, establishing suspense, structure, and psychological insight. At 35, he demonstrated not only mastery of mood and atmosphere but also a pioneering mind, shaping a new genre that would influence literature for generations. At 36, Edgar Allan Poe achieved national fame with the publication of The Raven in 1845. The poem's haunting rhythm, musical language, and themes of loss captured the public imagination almost immediately. Readers marveled at his mastery of suspense and atmosphere, while critics debated its brilliance. Yet behind this recognition, Poe's personal life remained fragile. Financial struggles persisted, and public admiration offered little security or comfort. Fame, though celebrated, proved hollow, emphasizing the contrast between external acclaim and private hardship. During this period, Poe navigated attention, expectation, and opportunity, refining his craft while enduring ongoing pressures. The Raven not only solidified his reputation as a master of mood and psychological depth but also highlighted the duality of his life, celebrated as a literary genius, yet struggling quietly against the relentless realities of circumstance. Between the ages of 36 and 38, Edgar Allan Poe faced a profound and quiet dread. Virginia, his beloved wife, fell seriously ill with tuberculosis. Her weakening health shadowed the household, and each day brought anticipation, anxiety, and emotional exhaustion. Poe's creative energy continued, yet his work became infused with a deepened melancholy, reflecting both love and helplessness. The home, once a place of intimacy, was now filled with the tension of illness and care. In these years, Poe observed the fragility of life firsthand, capturing in his writing the subtle interplay between hope and despair. The constant presence of suffering tempered his artistry with restraint, shaping his later explorations of loss, longing, and the inevitability of mortality. Though quiet and measured, this period left an indelible mark on Poe's emotional and creative life. Between the ages of 38 and 40, Edgar Allan Poe endured the devastating loss of his beloved wife, Virginia. Her death cast a shadow of profound grief and sorrow over his life, leaving him to confront solitude and mortality in its most intimate form. During this period, Poe channeled his pain into poetry and prose, producing works such as Annabel Lee, where love and loss intertwine with haunting beauty. His writing became a vessel for mourning, marked by emotional depth, restraint, and dignity. The intensity of personal suffering enriched his creative voice, allowing him to explore themes of memory, longing, and the fragility of life. Though sorrow defined these years, Poe's resilience and artistic focus transformed private tragedy into enduring literary expression, shaping the legacy that would endure far beyond his lifetime. At the age of 40, Edgar Allan Poe entered the final chapter of his life, marked by travel, attempts at recovery, and relentless uncertainty. He lectured in various cities, seeking to regain financial stability and public attention, while continuing to write with focused intensity. Poe planned new works and explored opportunities, yet his health and fortune declined steadily. During this period, he became increasingly restless, moving from city to city, haunted by both past losses and present struggles. The final months were filled with mystery, anticipation, and the shadow of mortality. His disappearance and sudden decline remain enigmatic, underscoring a life defined by brilliance, ambition, and fragility. Even in uncertainty, Poe's dedication to art never waned, leaving traces of genius in every work he produced during this final stage of life. In 1849, at the age of 40, Edgar Allan Poe passed away under mysterious and unresolved circumstances, leaving the world to ponder the final chapter of a brilliant yet tragic life. His death, sudden and enigmatic, shrouded his final days in uncertainty, echoing the tension and melancholy that characterized both his work and his existence. Yet Poe's legacy endures far beyond mortality, influencing generations of writers, poets, and creators. His mastery of mood, psychological depth, and narrative innovation transformed literature, from Gothic horror to detective fiction. Though his life ended in mystery, his influence is immortal, preserved in every shadowed tale, every carefully crafted poem, and every mind that draws inspiration from his genius. Poe's story reminds us that while life may be fleeting, the power of imagination and art is eternal.